going on? Welcome inside the Red Mile Rundown. We are at episode 75 of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening to us. A part of your podcast rotation. I am your host, John Easthope, and alongside me, as always, my good friend from FlamesNation.ca, Robert Munich. How are we today, Robert?
It's over. It's finally over. The season's over. Thank God. Oh my God. I was near the end of the year there. I was having some issues watching some of these games, but nope, doing great. How are you doing, John? Let's hear from you. What's going on with you?
We're good. We made it through all 82 regular season Flame games. Some were a hell of a lot tougher to get through than others. Some were downright impossible to get through. Others were actually all right to watch, but it's finally over, Robert. So I guess it is time, like most podcasts will be doing in radio shows, time for a post-mortem on the Calgary Flames in what was a troubling season that seemed to get worse at times. A troubling season where there was some few bright spots with kids playing, younger players playing, a couple of nice different storylines. But overall, Robert, what do you make of the 2025-26 season for the Calgary Flames? Because I might be putting it lightly here. It wasn't good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you finish fourth last in the NHL, it's been a rough season, but it was a necessary one. It really was. I think the last thing that Flames fans wanted to see was basically what happened last year, and you're in the mix and you're fighting for the second wild card spot, and you eventually come up short. I think that's the last thing we wanted to see, and it didn't happen this year. They finally bottomed out. They finally chose a direction, and yes, on the ice, it was not very entertaining. There were a lot of boring nights, but unfortunately, in a 32-team NHL with a salary cap, you have to go through your highs and lows, and unfortunately, at this time of where the Flames are in their winning cycle, they're at that low, and you have to go through that in order to get to the place where you want to be, which is a consistent playoff team in a legitimate cup threat for at least a few years. Like, you have to go through these bad years. So this is a necessary evil. It had to happen, and I'm happy that we're going to have to go through, a couple of these tough seasons in order to hopefully get, let's call it 6 to 10 years of really good, consistent, exciting Flames hockey. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag in that regard for sure.
We make it sound sometimes how this season was going on. We make it sound like everything was all negative, and there was a lot that we didn't like all season. Like, obviously, the piling losses didn't help. The start of the season was terrible. You saw injuries and big injuries to guys, and Huberdeau leaves the season early, and those things, and a lot of negatives. But I like what you hit on in that, Robert, where you talked about they made a direction change. And so for me, this season, yeah, as tough as some of these games were to watch, it was nice to see the Flames infuse a ton of youth into their lineup. Gridden gets to be a full-time NHLer partway through the season. We saw Jan Kuznetsov get an opportunity and run with it. Bristevich, I thought, played really well and got stronger as the season went on. Perek got an opportunity, of course. Dustin Wolf was playing. Matt Coronado got a lot of time in the top six and power play time. You saw the youth get used more and more to get more responsibility. So as negative as some of the season might have been, I think there is a ton to actually take away from the season in a positive light. The direction change, highlighting that. The playing of the kids highlights that. And now an opportunity to draft in what will be the top six, hopefully top 2 or 3, after the lottery balls fall, to add another player to the mix that the Flames can build around. So this season, and we're probably going to get another one similar to it next year, where, okay, the on-ice results aren't going to be there for the team, and that's fine, because for me personally, it's going to be, hey, I'm watching the progression of Matt Gridden become a no doubt top 6 NHLer. I'm watching Zane Perek develop in front of our eyes from a guy that many of us thought needed to go back to the AHL or OHL earlier in the year, to a guy who I think plays top 4 minutes next year, to a guy like Jan Kuznetsov continuing to develop, Kevin Ball continuing to develop. So that for me is what I'm going to be watching over the next couple seasons for the Flames, and they started it this season. I'm thankful for that. As tough as it was to watch, say, I don't know, the Mammoth game on a Tuesday night in the middle of February, it can get tough to watch those games. I get that. But I think it's very exciting to watch these kids play, and good on the Flames for making that switch, because the murky middleman, that was not working for us Flame fans.
No. I'll let me throw something by you here, just kind of like a take or an idea here. I'm almost thinking that the worst is behind us in terms of the rebuild and in terms of like the on ice product, because since Craig Conroy took over, you had the 23-24 season when he traded half the roster, all pending UFAs, and that was tough. I mean, that was another mushy middle year. They get the ninth overall pick, and looks like they picked a good player, which is great, but that was still a little mushy middle. And, with all the trades and everything, like it wasn't a very fun year. And then you had the 24-25 year where, they're competitive and they got off to that great start and they were right in the mix all year, but they don't do anything at the trade deadline. They don't sell, they don't take a future direction, and they miss the playoffs and they pick in the mushy middle again. That was super frustrating. Although, I mean, there were some fun nights and some fun games there, but in the grand scheme of things, it was not an ideal year. They didn't really accomplish anything. And then you had this year, which was really rough. I think this is the lowest it's going to get, because starting next year, Matvei Gridin's going to be in the top six the entire season. Zane Parek's going to be running the first power play unit the entire season. You have Kuznetsov, you have Brstevich, and then and it's also, I mean, on top of that, it's going to be the final season in the Saddle Dome. So there's actually going to be a lot to look forward to next year. And then the following year after that, well, I'm assuming they're still going to be in their rebuild. They'll move into Scotia Place. Wittenbach and Reshny might be with the team, and there might be some other young players that make the team. Could Suniev be a full-time NHLer, that kind of thing. That's going to be exciting to watch. So I think this past season, the 25-26 season, we are as low as it can possibly go. And I think it can only go up from here in terms of entertainment value and storylines and watching young players. Like, rebuilds, they can be difficult, but I think we're coming out on the other side of like the darkest period here. Like, do you think that's fair, or am I just completely out to lunch on that?
Yeah, I like that actually. I think the tear down part of a rebuild is always the worst, right? You're tearing down what you previously built. You're getting rid of the key players, the Andersons, the Uyghurs, the Kadris. You go back even a little bit further, the Lindholms, the Hannafins, and those guys. You're tearing down what you previously built and hoped on that failed in the playoffs or failed to even get into the playoffs in some seasons. And we've talked about this on the podcast, Robert. We think that this Flames rebuild doesn't need to be this 7, 8, 9 year slog, right? They have a ton of pieces already. So the final teardown of the Uyghur Kadri type trades, I think, was just the end of the teardown part. They've started building already with the Zaries and Frosts are here, the Farabees are here. You add on top the Griddens are here, the Pareks are here, Brustevich, so on and so forth. You have the goaltender, which is a huge part of trying to rebuild here. So I like that take, Robert, a lot. I didn't think of it that way. And it might not be in terms of win losses next year on the ice, but like you mentioned there, I think in terms of the watchability of the team, the excitement around the team is going to start to ramp up with the Saddle Dome closing and Scotia Place opening, with these new players coming in, whoever they add in the draft this season. It's a really good take by you, Robert. That's a great point. So I'm fully on board with that one, because this rebuild for the Flames, it doesn't need to be this big long slog. A couple of seasons, rebuild some stuff, get these kids to progress. We've seen Craig Conroy draft and the development staff develop these guys at a quicker rate than a lot of people thought. Like, no one thought coming into the season that Matvei Gridin was going to be a top 6 forward. Yeah, we thought he might get some games and he could push some guys, but he comes in here, he's a no doubt guy. They continue to hit on these guys that they draft like this, then next season's going to be a lot of fun. The season after that's going to be even more fun than that. And these guys are going to build this quicker than I think some of us think, or some people out there might think. And it's exciting for Flame fans to have that carrot in front of them here.
For sure. And like, I just think the worst product that you can watch in the NHL is an old veteran team that's in the mushy middle. And that's exactly where the Flames have been, since the 2022-2023 year, like when Johnny and Kachuk left.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically been, it was 22-23, 23-24, 24-25. Those were all years where there were barely any young players in the lineup. There was really no hope. It was just like you've described it, a slog. It's older veteran players who have no future in the organization trying to compete for the second wildcard spot. Like, that's awful hockey to watch, and we're finally out of it. Like, I think the most exciting hockey you can watch is obviously a good consistent playoff team, but it's also when you're getting young players, like guys who are going to be on this team for the next 10 to 15 years, you're watching them at the beginning of their career and you're watching them grow together and build this new core together. Like I go back to the 2014-15 season when we saw Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau enter the league together. I know Monahan played the year before, but as a duo, entered the year together. And then all of a sudden you add Sam Bennett to the mix, and then you add Kachuk to the mix, and all of a sudden you're building this really good young core of players together, and you're watching them develop. Like that was very exciting at the time, and I think we're at the start of something very similar to that, hopefully better, here with the Flames. So yeah, I'm excited to see just what these young guys can provide, and like I said, watching Gridden for a full year in an important role is going to be a lot of fun. Watching Perek not get healthy scratched every third game and play 8 minutes a night and barely get any power play time. Like that's not going to happen next year. He's going to be an important part of the first power play unit and probably play, probably 15 to 20 minutes a night, which is exciting. So those are the things I'm looking forward to. And yeah, I do think the darkest days of the rebuild are behind us, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's awesome to look at this team going into next year, and you're going to see probably almost the exact same cast of characters next year, but they're going to be in different spots on the roster. Grid in top 6. You're going to see Perek, Brstevich, Kuznetsov, Ball all get around top 4 minutes. Like it's exciting. It's very exciting to look forward to. But before we get there, Rob, before we get too over our skis here talking about next season, let's kind of look back on this season a little bit more here. And locker cleanout happened the day after the final game. They're flying high after a nice win. The guys met with the media. Anything stick out to you about locker cleanout day? Was it much more of the same? Did you expect anything different? Anyone stand out for you? I found a lot of these interviews were status quo here, especially the dry answers we got from Ryan Huska, typical answers from Ryan Huska, which is what you want, which is what the head coach is going to say, right? Anything stick out to you from locker cleanout day?
Yeah, I'd say like the overall theme that I came away with was just stability. This is the first time in a very long time where the Calgary Flames organization has been stable and there hasn't been any drama and there hasn't been any major questions around the future of the team or some of the individual players. Like this is the first time in a while where I can remember thinking to myself, like there's not really any like juicy interesting storylines right now because things are just so stable. And I give Craig Conroy all the credit in the world for being able to put that in place. Because like you look around the NHL right now, and there are so many teams that just are a complete disaster. You start out west with the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, they're a joke. The Winnipeg Jets, you see Connor Hellebuck come out and say he doesn't think he can win a Stanley Cup there. There's some drama there. There's been some drama around the Chicago Blackhawks and the fact that they haven't been able to get through, kind of like a San Jose has. And you look at Toronto, like they're a train wrecks. Detroit, people are pissed there. Like Calgary was always in that conversation over the last, I would say, probably 7 to 8 years, and they're finally out of that mix. So they have their long-term GM in place. They have their coach in place. They have a long-term plan, and they have a direction. I think this is probably as united as the fan base has been in a long time. I think everybody's on board for the rebuild, and the players seem pretty happy too. Like there's no drama, there's no instability like we saw under Brad Treliving. So that's kind of my main takeaway from the whole locker cleanout day and just kind of the season as a whole. It feels like this team finally knows what they're doing, and there's no drama, which sometimes the drama is fun and it's fun to cover and it makes things interesting, but at the same time it does get tiring after a while. Like I know, basically from 2018 to basically when they traded Mackenzie Weegar and Nazem Kadri, like there was a lot of storylines and a lot of drama and a lot of this team's they're disappointing, which player is going to get traded next, like all that kind of stuff. Who's the GM going to be, who's the coach going to be? There's drama between the coach and the players. Like those days are over right now, which I think is pretty nice.
Yeah, it is good to see, and you saw that in the players as well. I thought a lot of these interviews, for the most part, they're pretty positive. Like these players were positive in their messages. Like they were all disappointed not to be playoffs and not to achieve their goals, which is understandable. They're all pretty upbeat about what they could do next year and what they could do this offseason to help them propel next year. And the message that I got on a whole, I loved your word stability, by the way, Robert. It for me was they all wanted to be part of the solution. Like these guys came, like they all came to the podium with the one goal in mind that I need to be better next year to help find the solution for the Flames to become that playoff team again. And that playoff word might scare people going into next season, but that's the mindset of players. They want to be a playoff player. They want to be a playoff team. They want to compete for the Stanley Cup. We watched a weekend of great Stanley Cup action. Like I would love for the Flames to be in the mix. And I liked the attitude of the players that they weren't doom and gloom like we saw from other markets. You mentioned Winnipeg and Vancouver, a couple of really doom and gloom locker cleanout days for those franchises. It wasn't like that in Calgary. It was the future is bright. We have a direction. We're excited to be part of that direction. And a lot of players were like, if Conroy wants me here, we're going to be here. We're going to be part of the solution. Guys like White Cloud, his pressure stood out to me a little bit because he talked about how much he enjoyed being here in Calgary and how much he proved to himself that he can be a top pairing defenseman and play against other teams' top lines. And he wants to be able to come back and do that again for this team. These guys are committed to the logo on the front of the jersey on a whole here, and that's exciting to hear, exciting to see. And that's what you want when you have your locker room clean out. The disappointment is going to be there, and you like that. You like that players aren't satisfied with not winning it all. And you like that here that players want to be part of the solution. Now, some of those guys, what else are they going to say? Of course, that comes to mind. But these guys were genuine, I felt, overhaul here. That they want to be part of the solution. And that's good to see. We know that it couldn't have been easy for the players in that room over the course of the season. Some days harder than others. Like you can't tell me it was hard to get up in the middle of February and slog your way down to the Saddle Dome to take on the New York Islanders or whoever was in town that day. Like some days were going to be harder than others for these players, but they were pros and they showed up. And I like the attitude we saw from it, Robert. It was pretty awesome from a fan point of view to see that. You sent me here a question that I've been humming and hawing over about locker room cleanout, about did I like what Craig Conroy had to say about the season, about the future of the Flames. And I keep thinking about it, Robert, and I'm not sure what to make of Craig Conroy's comments other than the fact of what else is he going to say? Of course, he wants to be a playoff team, and of course, he wants to make this team better. But what stood out to you about Craig Conroy and his presser with the media at locker room cleanout day? Because he said a lot, but did he actually say anything for you?
You know what? Like as a GM these days, like when you hold a press conference or you take questions, you have to be so careful about what you say because of the social media world, because you have, dipshits like me clipping every single quote that comes out of the guy's mouth. So yeah, he had to be careful, but there were a couple themes that he really talked about a lot. And one was that they're not going to rush things, which was a breath of fresh air to hear. Yep. He talked about how the Calgary Flames, they want to be a team that makes the playoffs for 10 years in a row and are legit cup threats. And they don't want to be a team that's in 1 year, out the next, in 1 year, out the next. And that was refreshing to hear because, Conroy was part of this organization through those years where they were that team that was in the playoffs 1 year, out the next, in 1 year, out the next. And I think he saw how frustrating that was, not only for the fans, but just for the players and the organization, just that inconsistency sucked. And I think one of the reasons why they were so inconsistent was because Brad Treliving rushed things. After they made the playoffs in 2014-15, they go out and they start spending a first and 2 seconds on Dougie Hamilton, and they're signing Michael Frolik to a big-time free agent contract, and then they're trading for Travis Hamonic and Mike Smith and Curtis Lazar, and then they're signing James Neal. Like they completely rushed things, and I think that really screwed over the team. And Craig Conroy had a front row seat to that. And I really hope that he learns from that experience. And based off of his press conference and what he was saying, it does sound like he did, that he learned from that. So I think he's in a position right now where he wants to be patient. The question that I have is, will ownership and a guy like Don Maloney let him do that? What happens if in the first year at Scotia Place, they're in a playoff spot at the trade deadline? is Murray Edwards going to force his hand and force Craig Conroy to trade picks and prospects for veterans? Like that's what worries me. But from a Conroy perspective, I thought he was pretty good in that press conference, and he was preaching young players, and he was preaching the draft and patience and all that kind of stuff. So I liked what he said. I didn't think there was really anything in there that was controversial or going against the idea of adding young players and building a long-term direction.
These general managers are so good at the word salad, saying a lot without saying a lot. But I do like what you mentioned there. I do like that he was talking about being a stable franchise going forward, with being a consistent playoff team, and how he wants to be a playoff team, how he wants these guys to be part of the solution, how he wants to make sure that he's building through the draft and developing these players. So that was a good positive message from the general manager for the fan base. Like it's a lot better to sit down and hear a general manager talk about that kind of stuff rather than talk about how they need to fix it right away and that next year it's unacceptable and that we got to be a playoff team and be all in a negative press conference. I thought it was very upbeat from Craig Conroy. He didn't, like I mentioned, he didn't say a lot for me, but it was nice to have the general manager sit there and just be positive what he thinks this future of this team is going to be like. He sounds really excited, Robert, about a top 6 pick like the rest of us. He sounds really excited about those 6 players that they have internally in their top 6 and who could be potentially picked for them, and that gets you excited, because if the general manager is that excited about some players, you can be very excited about those players as well and about who they're going to draft here. It doesn't sound like they're going to do some off-board thing, like they're going to pick a really solid player there. And I like that the general manager comes in with emotion and is excited, and generally he looks like a fan running a hockey team at times, Robert. He's just so excited to talk Flames hockey. And he's all about fixing this team, making this team a consistent team going forward, a consistent playoff contending team going forward. And he sounds like he's ready to do that through his work in the draft. And I love that approach from Craig Conroy. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he basically just did the exact opposite of Brad Treliving. That makes me a huge fan of his. Just Craig Conroy should just have like a big sign on his wall in his office that just says, do the exact opposite of Brad Treliving, and I think he'll end up having a lot of success.
Yeah. What would Tree do? Now don't do that.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. We need to make those t-shirts, Rob. That's a good t-shirt. So anything else stand out to you from locker room cleanout? I thought that I did mention that Ryan Husker, I thought his was pretty bland. He did a lot of coaches talk. I thought a lot of the players are very positive in this thing. Anything else stand out to you from locker room cleanout?
Yeah, I'm with you when it comes to Huska. I didn't think he was all that interesting, and it's hard for a coach, for a team that was in 4th last in the NHL. It's hard for him to come out and have profound thoughts on what happened. I did like he talked about how they need to get way faster, which I completely agree with. They're by far the slowest team in the NHL, so part of that's going to be personnel. They're going to have to add speed to the lineup over the next 4 or 5 years, but I think another part of it could be they could play a little bit faster and they could take some more chances and be a little more offensive. And I think he did that after the trade deadline. Like on 960, he talked a lot about how one of the changes they made was they were exiting their defensive zone quicker and a little bit earlier than they were at the beginning of the year. So, sometimes guys would fly the zone. Some wingers would get out, a little bit high, closer to the red line or opposing blue line, which I think led to a lot more, odd man rushes and rush offense. So I hope we continue to see that next year. The other thing he mentioned was, they were talking about player development, and he was just talking about like how difficult it is to develop players at the NHL level and how they have plans in place to ensure that players don't lose their confidence and don't get in over their skis. And, like I liked hearing that. I think the execution of their plans could have been a little bit better. I think they could have trusted their young players a little bit more than they did, but it was good just to hear him acknowledge that like they do consider their development. They do have a plan in place. At the beginning of the season, it wasn't just him trying to play all the veterans over the young players. It was, hey, like these young guys, particularly as Zane Perek, like they need to take their time to get used to the NHL game. So I thought that was interesting too. And then from the player's perspective, Connor Zeri's quote, I clipped it. He talked about when you have younger players with skill, you don't want to put a leash on them. So like the quote that he said was, when you have younger players with talent and skill, you don't want to hold them back. You don't want to put a leash on them, right? At the end of the day, who gives a shit if they make a mistake? It's going to happen. And like, number one, I love that.
Hmm.
And I wish the Flames would kind of adopt that sort of mentality a little bit more than they have. But I also found it to be maybe a little bit of a shot at Ryan Huska for the way they play. So I thought that quote was very interesting from Connor Zary, and then just like a couple others where the leadership and the personalities of guys like Ryan Strome and Zach Whitecloud, I thought those two guys were super impressive. Like, I don't think the Flames could have brought in two better people. You know, I even throw Ole Mata in that mix too. I don't think they could have brought in better people to surround this team with. I'm just super impressed with just those people. Not even like their abilities on the ice, but just like their
Yeah, good
leadership
humans.
qualities and just their character. Like, these are really good people, and these are the type of people that you want on your team during a rebuild like the Flames are going through. And then just the final takeaway was Matvei Gridin. He talked about how he wasn't ready for the NHL at the beginning of the year, and how his time in the AHL really helped him get to the point where he got to in the final 2 months of the season. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting observation from him. But yeah, aside from that, it was a lot of cliche sort of hockey answers, but there was a couple interesting things there.
That's such maturity by Matt Bay. Just to like, hey, my game's not good enough. Let me go play in the AHL. Like, not a lot of players would have that awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to your Zary quote, like, I really hope that Connor Zary and Ryan Huska's end of season meeting was let's put our nuts on the table here and have this out, because there has to be something going on between those two. The way that Zary was used this season, the frustration that Zary seemingly had with the quote at the end of the season here, and things like that. So I really hope those two get on the same page, because there's a player there for the Flames. We've talked about Zary numerous times on this podcast. There's a useful player there for your middle six if you can get him going. So hopefully that sorts itself out as well, and hopefully Huska can. I think this is one of those years as well where Huska's learned to use these younger players. Like, he's been a guy who's been told to win. That's been the mantra, is win, get into the playoffs, and this is the first year really where they've switched direction, and Huska's had to kind of pivot his coaching behind the bench. And I thought he did a decent job about that. And then the last thing that stuck out for me with the player interviews is just the confidence Jonathan Huberdeau had that his ability, that his rehab's going well, that he'll be back on the ice soon. He said June, and that he'll be ready for training camp. So say what you want about Jonathan Huberdeau, and heaven knows you and I have on this podcast. Say what you want about it. It's nice to hear that a guy's rehab's going well, and that an injury is going to prevent him from being part, or hopefully part of, training camp. So a little bit of positive news on an injury front for Jonathan Huberdeau, because it's you never want a guy to leave because of an injury or be out because of an injury. So it's good to hear the positive from Jonathan Huberdeau and how positive he was in his rehab here, Robert.
Hey, did you think the Zary quote, like the one that I just said about putting a leash on skill, did you think that was a bit of a public shot at Huska?
100%. I think it is. I go back to what I was just saying about how the way that he was used this season, he's considered a younger player still, 24 years old. He's still trying to cut his teeth here. He's got skills. He's not the only one. Zane Parekh, Matt Figueroa, let these guys play. So I think it kind of was a bit of a shot. I think, and I don't want to start some like rumor online or anything like that, but I really wonder if there is something between Huska and Zary this year that they just weren't on the same page. Some sort of little bit of a beef or something between the two of them that just, I don't know if Huska can't get the most out of Zary, or Zary doesn't like the way Huska plays, or how his coach. I don't know. You're never going to get along with everybody, so hope professionalism wins out at the end of the day. But I do think it was a bit of a shot.
I think so too. I think there is something there, and I wonder if that opinion is shared by some of the other young players on this team. Like, when guys like Zary, Parekh, Gridin, Coronado, Frost, Farabee, like when those types of guys go out for beers, or throw Brustevich in there, when they're just like, they go for dinner, they go for beers, and they're just kind of talking about things. I wonder if they're all on the same page of, like the way we're playing right now is just not conducive for our skill sets. And like, I wonder if that's like a common theme among that group, because if it is, they're going to have to hash it out with Huska, because if Ryan continues to coach the way he did from October to, let's call it, February, there might start to be some friction in the room between the coach and the players.
He'll
I
lose
could,
his room.
yeah, yeah. You know
He'll
what? Like,
lose it.
I don't. Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. Like, I think maybe not to the point of like a Craig Berube or Daryl Sutter, but it could start to happen slowly, and like could be like a one of the like a paper cut effect where you know
Mm-hmm.
one doesn't make a difference, but if you got 100, then all of a sudden it starts to become a problem, sort of thing. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. I think it's something that he needs to be careful with, because if you lose that group of players, which is like the next core of this team, then you're in trouble as a head coach.
Yeah, he'll be gone. Now, to his credit, to Kuska's credit, he did change near the end of the year. You mentioned it. They changed their approach, how they were leaving the zone, how they were. So if he continues to progress that direction, then I don't think there is a problem. I think he will address those needs of the players or the concerns of the younger skilled players by playing that way. But at the same time, he's got to be careful, like you mentioned there, Robert. Like he's walking a fine line, and he's got to make sure that he knows that which direction, how to approach this situation. So that'll be an interesting storyline headed into next season as well. Because
Yeah, I just
these young players are going to start running this room. Like these are the guys that are going to start running this room. You've lost most of your leadership outside of Backlund and Coleman. The leadership group's turned over. This is a new group of players, so you just got to kind of be careful, toe the line there, but also at the same time make sure that you're coaching properly here.
yeah, and like yeah, you make a good point. Like he did change things up, but is the reason he changed things up because they were just completely out of it?
I think he was forced to.
Right, like did Craig Conroy force his hand? So like I'm wondering, okay, they start next year, end of September, and Huska's back in. I need to do everything we can to get this team into the playoffs, and the only way to do that is to play incredible defense and to not take chances offensively, like I did between October and February this year. Like I worry that's going to be his mentality again. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they continue to play the way they did in the final, let's call it 6 weeks of the season. But I'll give the guy, the benefit of the doubt. I hope that happens, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily holding my breath on that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. That leads perfectly, Robert, into a great discussion we're about to have here about positives and negatives from this season here. Let's start with some positive stuff because there's way more negatives, let's be honest here. But let's come with some big positives we had from this season. We talked about Huska playing these kids and playing the youth. So for me, that's the first big one. The obvious one as a big positive of the season is we got to see the younger plays play. Griddens, Perex, Brstavich, so on and so forth. Kuznetsov takes a job. Even Kevin Ball and Connor Zary, those middling guys, most of those guys took a step forward. We saw some surprises from other players. What stood out to you most about this Flames season in a positive way, Robert, that allows maybe give you a little bit of excitement for next season? Because for me, number one's got to be the kids.
Yeah, I agree for sure. So I guess I'll start with just like I'll do like a couple on ice positive stories.
Love it.
First, I'll do Zane Parek's development, because up until they returned from the Olympic break, the season had not gone well for Zane, between the rough start to the year, the injury, and then they took him away from the team. They put him at the World Juniors for about 6 weeks. Then he sits again, and then he plays 4 games in the American Hockey League, and then there's the Olympic break. Like it's just it was not an ideal time for Parek. It was not the ideal year for him up until they got back from the Olympic break, and then things really took off from there. The coaching staff finally played him consistently. I think he only sat, I think it was 2 or 3 times between when they returned from the Olympic break and the end of the season. So he got a lot of ice time. He got a lot of opportunity. And then from the time they returned from the Olympic break to the end of the season, he looked like a completely different player. The last, I'd call it probably 4 weeks of the season, like he was dynamic. Mm-hmm. He was running that first power play. He's finally scoring goals. He scored 4 goals. And all 4 goals were beautiful. Like they were like absolute snipes. He looked like such a more confident player from the beginning of the season to the end. Like I don't know if like he could have learned more or even like developed more as the year went on than he did. So I think that was a major positive for the Flames this year. I don't think the year as a whole was necessarily that positive for Zane, but just the overall development and the fact that he looked way more confident and he was taking way more chances and he was making moves and like he looked like the Zane Parekh who played with that swagger in the Ontario Hockey League and the World Juniors. Like he looked like that player at the NHL level for the first time all year, in the final 4 weeks of the year. And I thought that was super exciting. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do next year. So that was kind of like the big takeaway for me on the ice.
Yeah, I like that. The one thing about Zane that I don't think we're talking about it enough is how much turbulence that guy took on this year for the first like 2/3 of the season, and he took it head on. He approached it head on, and he dealt with it head on. And I think that it helped him have a little bit of adversity to help his career get kicked off here, because he kind of dug in that last third of the season. Like that goal against LA was like Kale McCarr-esque, people were calling it online and stuff like that. Like he really came along, and by the end of the season, you saw a confident hockey player who looked like he matured right in front of our eyes through this season. And I think we have to credit, and I know he probably didn't like it at the time, but you got to credit the turbulence for giving him something to deal with, and the way that he was able to deal with it and come through on the other side a much better player. His development over the last third of the season was incredible. Like we watched this guy go from playing maybe 11 minutes a night to running power play one, being a go-to guy. But go back to the second game in Colorado with the Flames played near the end of the season here, and they went down to 5 defensemen, and he was counted on to do a lot of heavy lifting, and he excelled overall in that role. The way that he progressed and things, you saw a lot of little things from Zane Parekh, and for me, the maturity leads the way in what we saw from his on ice perspective. And then in the media, the way he approached the media and talked with fans through the media was outstanding. It's you saw personality, which you don't get a lot of in sports, and it's awesome to watch from Zane Parekh. So good breakdown there, Robert, of Zane Parekh. My guy that I'd go to for along the same lines here was Jan Kuznetsov, and I hate that he got injured partway through the season and it kind of slowed his development, but he was given an opportunity early in the season, and he just said, okay, this is my job now, thank you very much. And the guy got better and better and better as the game went. He does not play a sexy game, Robert. He does not play the best game out there. You're not trying to find Jan Kuznetsov highlights. He's not going to lay down Dion Phaneuf hits or Scott Stevens style hits. He's not going to dangle you like a Zane Parekh would or a Cale McCarr would, but he's going to give you an honest effort that you can rely on. One that you can play beside a guy like a Hunter Brzustevich or a Zane Parekh, a guy who is offensively gifted, a guy that you can rely on to be a defender in your own end. And he fits under that cloud of playing the younger player. So for me, Jan Kuznetsov is a big positive for the Flames because it gives them an option on that left side. And we all know the left side of the Flames defense is a little bit weaker. It's Kevin Ball, it's Jan Kuznetsov, and then who? Oli Yamada, and then who, right? So you don't really have a ton of players coming on the left side of that defense. So it was nice to see Jan Kuznetsov take that step, take that job. And I think this is a top 4 guy going forward for the Flames. If he can continue to develop and play like he has, this could be, I keep calling him like he's not quite a Robin Regeer style defender, but he can be that type of pillar for the Flames on the back end going forward. So for me, Jan Kuznetsov is a huge positive for the Calgary Flames alongside those other young guys on the back end there, Robert. And Robert's still muted, so I'm going to keep talking until he turns his mic on. So
I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good, buddy.
Yeah, I agree. He was a bit of a revelation this year. Heading into the year, I mean, they chose Daniil Miramanov over him. Like that's what they thought about Jan Kuznetsov to start the year. And the fact that he did clear waivers, thank God. And
right.
Yeah, and just the fact that he was able to go from being a guy who was on waivers after training camp to getting called up and not going back to the AHL, and he will never play another game in the American Hockey League again, is incredible. It's a fantastic story for the Flames. So yeah, that's a really good one. Obviously there's Matvei Gridin to add to the list, and it's just the idea that Gridin is a legit difference maker, because when the Flames picked him, there were a lot of fans who were like, who the hell
right?
did we just pick? kind of like almost like a Mark Jankowski sort of thing. A lot of like a lot of the broadcasters on Sportsnet said that it was a big time reach and there was a lot of negativity around the pick, but it's turned out to be absolutely brilliant. And you know, was Matt Bay-Gridden, was he going to be a guy who puts up 40 points in the NHL, or could he be 60-point guy? Could he be an 80-point guy? I think he showed the potential to be a legitimate first line winger, difference making type of player, a guy who can put up between 70 to 90 points a year, a guy that can make his teammates better, a guy who makes great plays, but also has a lethal shot. You know, like heading into the year, I didn't really know exactly what the Flames were getting in Gridden. And what I think he proved this year is that the potential is there for him to become a very, very good player. Like I don't know if I want to call him great, but like a high end winger in the NHL. So that was super exciting. And then one other one I'll throw in there just in terms of on ice is that the duo of Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee, they might have solidified themselves as part of the middle class of this roster for a long time. Like when you're building out your NHL team, like you still need like good middle six players. And I think Farabee and Frost could be those guys moving forward. You know, I don't think they'll be quite as effective as, say, like a Backlund and Coleman duo, because those two guys are just so dominant defensively. But like, I think there's potential for both those guys to be part of a second or third line on the Flames for a long time if they want to stay here. And I didn't know if that was going to be the case heading into the year, because both guys struggled so much when coming to Calgary last year, and they're a big reason why they weren't able to get over the hump and get into the playoffs. But this year they've come in and showed that they're good players. Like they're legitimate good hockey players. I don't think they're, you know, Craig Conner was talking about how he thinks Morgan Frost could be a 60+ point player. Like I don't know if I see that necessarily, but
Easy,
I do.
Craig.
Yeah. Calm down a little bit there, bud. But I do see two players who could be 35 to 45 point players for a long time in the league and play special teams. And like, you know, Morgan Frost was great in the face-off circle, and Farabee was on the penalty kill and blocked a million shots. Like they bring some important elements to a team. And I think they're two guys that could fill out the middle six of the Flames in the future. So actually, I thought their seasons could both be looked at in a positive light for sure.
Yeah, reacting to that is everyone likes to talk in the media about you need veterans. You know, you got to have your veterans. These two guys could be your veterans going forward.
100%.
Forward group. Like they're not that old, but at the same time, by the time the next group of players come around, these are going to be two players in their early 30s that are going to be around. And those are the players you want to rely on to be a good leadership group. So they come leaps and bounds. I'm with you on that one. And to go back to Matt Bay-Gridden, it's the lowest hanging fruit to praise this guy on the Flames this year because of the season he had. But for a 28th overall pick, just 2 drafts ago now, it's a pretty good steal. I think if you redraft that draft, he goes a lot higher than 28. This is a guy who, and I think you nailed it, Robert, with his point total. This is a guy who could easily be a point per game player for a numerous years in a row here for the Flames. And that's a big get when you're trying to draft and rebuild a roster here. So that's a good get for the Flames. The last on ice one that I really want to mention on the podcast, Robert, and you've mentioned this before. We were on Locked On Flames earlier, and you talked about how this could be almost a controversy going forward, but it's the pairing of Devin Cooley and Dustin Wolf in goal for the Flames. We know that Dustin Wolf has a long-term contract. He's on track to be the number one. He's the pseudo number one for the Flames right now. But Devin Cooley answered a ton of questions about the Flames' backup goaltending situation and made that more of a tandem than I think a lot of people thought it was going to be heading into the season. And it's a lot of credit to the work that Devin put in this season to push Dustin Wolf. And it's a lot of pressure on Dustin Wolf to be the number one. I think going forward, these two guys work well together. They feed off one another. And so for me, that's a huge positive for the Flames. They know who their goaltenders are going forward here for at least the next 2 seasons, as they're both signed for 2 more years plus for Dustin Wolf. And I think Devin Cooley deserves a lot of credit for the work that he did here in taking that job as a backup, solidifying the goaltending for the Flames and saying, hey, Dustin, not quite your crease 100% yet because I'm still kicking around here. So I think it's a good thing. Internal competition for me is big when you're trying to develop players. And so I give that hat tip to Devin and Dustin in goal for the Flames.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the season, like when you and I were doing like our season predictions and all that kind of stuff, I was like pounding the table saying that Dustin Wolf should be playing at least 60 games this year. And
Yep.
like at least, because one of the big reasons why is because I thought Devin Cooley, like you and I both thought that he could be an NHL goalie, but there was a lot of reason for skepticism heading into the year just based off the way he finished last year in training camp. You know, when you take those two things into consideration, it was like, can he even play in the NHL? So I thought to myself, yeah, Dustin Wolf, like I was even saying, play him 65 games, play him 68 games, because we don't know what you have in Devin Cooley, but he just
Yep.
came in and proved everybody wrong, which is awesome. And
Yep.
my favorite part about Devin Cooley is just his personality, his post game interviews. Like this guy's got an electric personality. He's so much fun. He's just like happy go lucky. He's almost got that golden retriever kind of energy. Like I love that.
Yeah.
I wish more NHL players were like as upbeat and had as good a personality as a guy like Devin Cooley does. So yeah, I'm thrilled that he's part of this Flames team for the next, at least the next couple of years. And yeah, we'll see what happens beyond that.
One of my favorite parts about Devin Cooley in the media is you can't get the cliche answer out of him. Even if you ask him a question direct about a cliche answer, he won't give you the cliche answer. He'll find some philosophical way of twisting his answer and making it something different. It's quite entertaining, and I appreciate that from him.
Yeah, even like his year-end press conference there,
Yeah,
he was hilarious. Like, you know, most, you know, if the media asks like a player like, oh, like what are your plans this offseason? It's like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna put in a lot of hours training. You know, I'm gonna spend some time with some friends and
yeah,
family
yeah.
and just, you know, relax a little bit. Like all those BS cliche answers. And Cooley was like, he's like, man, like I'm gonna be depressed after this season because like my whole purpose is hockey, but like I'm gonna be able to like maybe go to some concerts. I'm gonna play jazz piano. I'm gonna join like a jazz trio. I'm like, this guy's awesome. Like, what NHL player would ever say anything like that? Like, that's so fun. So yeah, that guy's awesome. I'm such a big fan of his.
Training what? Who trains? Screw that. I'm gonna go play some jazz. Love
Yeah.
it. Absolutely love it from the guy. Robert, there are a ton going the other direction on the scale of positive negative for this team. How negative should we get on the end of this podcast here? And what strikes out to you the most about the downside of this year for the Flames, other than them being just awful in game here? What sticks out to you most negatively about the Flames this year? Because it was not a pretty season as much as we try to find positives in it. They did struggle. They didn't get a lot of results. There were a lot of tough nights for this group. They couldn't score with a damn for most of this season. Their power play was bottom 3 in the league the entire season. Their penalty kill started out on a struggle as well. That finally came around a little bit. How negative are we getting here at the end of the podcast here, Robert? Because there's a lot to pick from that bone.
Yeah, I mean, okay, just I do have just a couple more positives. Just I'll like rapid fire.
Okay.
Just because
Sweet.
we talked a lot of on ice positives. There are a bunch of off ice positives too. Like
Yeah,
just
fair.
the fact they're finally rebuilding. Thank God. And
Look at Robert
and
being positive today on a Monday.
that's what I'm all about. I'm all about positivity, the power of positivity. And then also the trade returns for Rasmus Anderson, Mackenzie Weegar, and Nazem Kadri, I thought were brilliant work by Craig Conroy. But yeah, some negatives. So like, I'll start with just the beginning of the season in general. They came into the year, in my opinion, they were directionless. They didn't make any moves in the offseason. They brought back the same team that got 96 points, and they weren't really rebuilding. They weren't really going for the playoffs. They were totally that mediocre, mushy middle team at the beginning of the year, and then they get off to the horrible start. There's you know upheaval among the fan base in terms of Ryan Huska's decisions to scratch Zane Parekh all the time, and he was scratching Matt Coronado and Connor Zary, and Coronado's playing on the fourth line, Zary's playing on the fourth line. Like, people were pissed at the beginning of the season with just how the Flames are handling it. And then just to add gasoline to the fire, Don Maloney goes out there and does, two of the most ridiculous interviews I've ever come across in my entire life. And, I cover the Vancouver Canucks for Canucks Army, their social media. And I watch Patrick Alvine and Jim Rutherford do press conferences, and those are disasters. Don Maloney was 10 times worse. Like, if he would have said to me, okay, you're going to give Don Maloney talking points, but your goal is to piss off the entire fan base. Like, what can you get Don Maloney to say to just make everybody so angry and so pissed off? Like, what are you going to do? And I would have written down exactly everything that he had said in those interviews. So it was like the first about 2 months of the year where it was just utter chaos. I mentioned that there's stability now, but there wasn't at the beginning of the season because they were directionless, because they were losing. Young players weren't getting opportunities. And then you get Don Maloney coming out there and just spewing a bunch of horse shit. That was a mess. And I actually think that was probably the biggest negative of the entire season, was just those first 2 months, the team messaging, Maloney, like it was such a mess to start the year. So the fact they were actually able to turn things around the way they did in terms of the direction of the organization, the messaging, all that kind of stuff is actually somewhat impressive. And I give Craig Conroy all the credit in the world for doing that. But yeah, I actually thought that was probably the biggest negative of the whole season.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, that was not great. They didn't start great, and I think that set a big tone for the season. And then they couldn't get out of their own way either. Like the Ryan Huska continually fumbling over who he's putting in the lineup, like you mentioned. The Don Maloney interviews, like you mentioned, they just couldn't get out of their own way. And so a bad start turned into a terrible beginning of the season, turned into a terrible half of season, and just couldn't get out of their own way. Even when they pivoted direction later in the season, the damage that they had already done to themselves essentially was enough to put them out of it, and just to make this a miserable slog for a good chunk of the season. And so for me, that's my big takeaway negatively of the Flames is if you just got out of your own way, you might not have still got the results, but you could have made the time around the team a little bit better. You could have made your fan base not so angry for 2/3 of the season. You could have made it a nicer place to come for the players each and every day. And I understand that this team wanted to be a playoff team, and that mantra of 1 point better than last year that they had coming into this season. And they got off to such a bad start, but then they snowballed it on themselves, man. It really, really did. That Don Maloney thing was an absolute disaster. It gave us podcasting content for like 7 weeks straight after that. Like, he kept doubling down on things and just like, come on, man, get out of your own way. So for me, that's the biggest negative. Flames just they got in their own way a lot, and it was at multiple levels of the organization, and the results on ice didn't help it. But sometimes you just got to help yourself, and the Flames didn't help themselves, especially letting Don Maloney double down on that interview.
That is the craziest part about the whole thing, is that he goes on TV and the interview was like 4 minutes, and he said so many stupid things in that 4 minutes. It was ridiculous. But then, like you said, he doubles down on it with the interview with Eric Francis, and he's calling, picking high in the draft fantasy hockey, and we need more Kadris, not less. It's like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. And then he somehow gets a contract extension a few weeks later. Like, that was just mind-boggling. But apparently it was signed at the beginning of the year, and they just announced it, which might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Everybody knows that was a lie. Yeah.
How happy you think Eric Francis was in that interview? Like, sitting there talking to Don Maloney, just getting all his answers. How happy you think Eric Francis was, and just knowing that article is just going to pop off?
Oh yeah, he was just seeing nothing but clicks, just clicks upon clicks upon clicks. He's like, oh, this is incredible. He was probably like evil laughing while Maloney was answering those questions.
Oh man, unreal. What else stuck to you out for the Flames this year, Robert? There's a lot to pick from that bone, like I mentioned, of the negative side. But we don't need to like dump on the team. But was there anything else that stuck out to you really on a big level that really needs to be addressed from the Flames negatively here?
Well, one thing I forgot about the beginning of the season, and I touched on it like a little bit earlier, was just the idea that they had to keep Daniil Miramanov in the NHL because of his salary, and they ended up losing, Ilya Solovyov on waivers, and they almost lost Yan Kuznetsov. So like they picked Miramanov, who has zero future in this organization. He has 1 year remaining on his contract. He was terrible the season prior. He was terrible in training camp. There was absolutely zero need to have him on the NHL roster, but they kept him over the young guys, and I thought that was just a massive mistake. I thought that was a complete blunder, and it almost cost them Yan Kuznetsov, who looks like he could be a top 4 defenseman, for the next six to 10 years, all because they wanted to keep Miramanov's salary in the NHL. Like, what a joke. So I hope the Flames learn from that experience. We'll see. Time will tell, but that was an absolute disaster. In terms of individual players, I mean, there were some guys who really struggled this year, and I'll start with Connor Zary. And heading into the year, that was like one of my negative predictions. I didn't think Zary was going to have a very good year, and it did happen, and it happened for the reasons why I said in the preseason they would. It was he'd never had a defined role on the team. There's no trust between him and Ryan Huska, and then also part of it's on Zary too. I mean, he's a bad NHL skater. I thought he really struggled to keep up with the play this year, and his shot is not where it needs to be. Like he didn't have that dynamic sort of element to his game that he had in his first 2 years in the NHL. And I thought he really struggled this season. So yeah, that's one on ice guy who I thought really struggled this year.
It's a shame too. It's a shame because everyone who listens to us knows that I've stuck up for Connor Zary a lot. But it was just you just don't have an answer of why he struggled. Like I just don't understand it from his perspective. Like you have all these tools. You weren't given a role on this team, but at the same time, you didn't take a role either. So there's a lot of work for Connor Zary to do this offseason because we've talked about this as well, where you look in that rearview mirror and you've got guys coming and they're coming in a hurry. We saw a bunch of them get jobs this year in the National Hockey League. Matt Baker took a job when given the opportunity. So if he's not careful, he's going to lose out here. He's going to be that odd man out if he's not careful. So I really want Connor Zary to have a good offseason, come into camp ready. And I think along those same lines, and I know the Calgary media and national media might not see it the same way as you and I, Robert, but I really thought Yegor Sharangovich had a struggle this year as well. I thought he looked a pace slower than he should have been. I really want to know where that goal scoring is gone because you see the shot and it's a pretty good shot at that. But I really just want more from Yegor Sharangovich. So yes, Connor Zary is a big one for me, and you laid out a good reason why and some statistics why I think Sharangovich is not far behind Connor Zary in that conversation. And those two, I think, should be the two worried about other kids coming in here and taking jobs. So big offseason, in my opinion, for both of those guys.
Yeah, I just Sharangovich is one of those players I have a really hard time watching him play because the give a shit meter seems so low with him. Mm-hmm. And if he's not scoring goals, if he's not scoring at a 25 plus goal rate, he is doing basically nothing for the team. There's zero physicality, there's zero intensity, there's no playmaking. Like all he has right now is the shot. And the crazy thing is, like, I think he scored 15 or 16 goals this year. I thought he was arguably their worst forward, and yet he still scored that many goals. So if he could somehow come back and be a little more intense and more driven and like care more, I genuinely think he could be a half decent NHL player. But I just don't know if he's got the kind of personality where it's like, he hates losing and he hates losing more than he loves winning. Like he's just not that kind of guy, and like he's not on the penalty kill anymore. I know like people were obsessed with him on the penalty kill a couple years ago, but like he's not a good defensive player. He's not a penalty killer. He's not that effective on the power play. He doesn't shoot the puck anymore. He doesn't hit. There's no intensity. Like really, really bad year from Yegor Sharangovich. I really struggled watching him. A couple other guys.
He should help the power play too, and that's a big frustration of mine. Is Yegor, you have that shot. That power play should be better with you on it.
Yeah, use it. Like he refuses to shoot the puck. It's so bizarre.
It's maddening.
Oh yeah, like just talking about him is pissing me off right now.
All right, who else you got, Robert?
I will not miss watching him play this summer. A couple other guys. I know he got traded, but Mackenzie Weegar I thought had just an awful season. Unfortunately, yeah. Like I'm such a big fan of the player and the person, but unfortunately, it was just one of those years where literally nothing went his way. He was terrible, and the fact that the Flames got 3 second-round picks and Mata and Castagna, like another masterclass by Craig Conroy. Like even like we were texting during the Utah game last night. Like he did not look very good in that game, and he turned the puck over for one of the Golden Knight goals. Like
for the game
the
winner.
fact that they got what they did was just incredible. There was also Martin Pospisil too. I thought Martin Pospisil had a really rough year, and it's not necessarily his fault though. Like I think you can really look at the injuries as the number one reason why he struggled so much. And I'm really hoping that he can get through the World Championships and have a great summer of training and come into training camp next year like ready to play like the wrecking ball that we know he can, and we'll see if the concussion issues kind of get in the way of the way he plays the game. Like I think it did this year. He wasn't even close to being as good a skater as he was in the past couple of years. He was nowhere close to being as physical. He was nowhere close to being as much of a rat as he was in the past. Like he had an awful season. And like I said, I think it's because of the injuries. I'm not putting it on him. I just think it's the injuries. And yeah, we'll see if he's able to come back next year and hopefully come back to being the player that we know he can be.
The big thing is when we talk about all these players for me this season, and this was a big takeaway for me, was how inconsistent this lineup was from game to game. You saw Morgan Frost be this like almost the elite center for games, and then other games he was invisible. You saw Sharon Govich score goals but not be good defensively. You saw Adam Klapka play so good he was playing up on the top line with Nazem Kadri when he was here, and then other times he looked like an NHL replaceable player. Just the maddeningly inconsistent play from the Flames this year overall. If they can sort out some of those inconsistencies, then I think they're going to be able to control the narrative a little bit more next year for this team. Wins and losses aside, it's more about the process for me for this Flames team. And when you can get guys to be a consistent player, Connor Zary is a big one for that. Be a more consistent player, and you can have better results going forward, both individually and as a team. And it goes pretty much across the entire roster. There's a few guys that I think you can take out of that. Like Devin Cooley was pretty consistent all season long, those type of players. But guys just need to be more consistent in their efforts, more consistent in their approach, and just be more consistent in what they're bringing to the table. The inconsistencies were so maddening this season from the Flames, because you'd think that guy like Postel, he played a really good game, and then you go to the next game and you can't even find him on the ice. Beecher goes game to 2 goals in one game and he looks decent. Then he's invisible for the rest of the season. Like, you just got to have a little bit of consistencies for the Flames, and that's growing pains when you get a younger roster together. But at the same time, Maffei Gruden was one of the more consistent players, and he's one of the younger players on the roster. So for me, these players have, on a whole, have got to be more consistent in their efforts for this team. And if they can get some of these guys to play to the back of their hockey cards and be those type of players, be like Michael Backlund, be a consistent guy every single night, and you'll have some more success. That's just kind of my overall negative for the Flames. Just cut out the inconsistencies. Easier said than done, of course, but you got to have it.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. A couple others I'll just throw out there. This one's like a little bit smaller, but just not giving Rory Cairns and William Stromgren a legitimate opportunity to become NHLers. Ryan Huska, he gave Jan Kuznetsov all the chances in the world. He gave Rustevich all the chances in the world, and he gave Gridden all the chances. They didn't do that with Cairns and Stromgren this year, which I thought was a little disappointing. They called both guys up, but Cairns, I think he got 2 games earlier on in the year. I think Stromgren played 3 or 4. Just wasn't enough. It really wasn't for guys that you need to find out what they are. And you're playing some other veteran players who aren't going to be part of your team long term, over those types of players. And I thought that was a little silly. So there was that. And then just finally, I'm personally like the team and Huberdeau himself don't sound worried whatsoever. I'm a little worried about the future of Huberdeau, and I was already worried about it prior to the surgery, but now he gets this hip surgery, hip resurfacing surgery, that it ended a lot of guys' careers, and a lot of guys haven't been able to come back from it. There's Patrick Kane as an exception, which is good. Like, I mean, that's you're happy to see there's at least one success story, but you listen to Huberdeau speak and you listen to the Flames speak, and they're making it sound like, oh, this is no big deal. Like, you'll get the surgery, you'll be ready for training camp. And I'm like, this injuries like ruin careers. Like, I'm a little concerned about it. So I hope Huberdeau is able to come back and be a 55 to 70 point player again, because I think the Flames, I think they need that from him, mainly for his trade value. Like, if he can get back to a consistent 60, 70 point guy and plays a half decent 200-foot game, all of a sudden when there's, let's say, 3 or 4 years left on that contract, maybe it becomes somewhat movable if they eat some salary. Like, I'm not even talking from like an on ice perspective, helping the team win. I'm talking like a trade value perspective. It's big to get him going again. So I'm a little worried about him, and that's kind of like my final negative story of the year.
Yeah, I know I was a little bit positive earlier in the episode about Huberdeau and how positive he was about the injury, but you look at the history of these injuries. Patrick Kane's the exception. John Klingberg's kind of the exception. He's playing. Name another guy though. That's where I go with it. Name another guy in sports who's come back and has played at a good, consistent level. It's ended more careers than it's helped. It's more for the walk of life after sports. It's more to help his quality of life after he's done playing. And he'll be pain free and he'll have a decent hip to run around with his kids with. So I'm hoping that you and I are both wrong on this and that he comes back and he is that 70-point player and he can be moved or he can help this Flames team when they take the next step. Either way. And I just don't know if we're going to see it or not, Robert. I really don't. I'm not scared about the injury, but I do have a lot of questions about what Jonathan Huberdeau is going to be post hip resurfacing surgery. That does not sound like a fun time either, Robert.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And like, you know, we saw how much he struggled before the surgery, and he's only getting older. Mm-hmm. And like the worst thing that could happen is, you know, he comes back and he's even a step slower than he was before. You know, like and instead of being a 55-point guy, he's now, you know, a 30 to 40-point guy, and he's making $10.5 million for another 5 years. Like that's what worries me. And if that ends up happening, then he literally is untradeable and you are stuck with him. And there's going to come a time where, you know, you're going to have to sign Ethan Wittenbach, Cole Reshny, Zane Parekh, Matt Vagridden. All those guys are going to be coming out of their entry-level contracts while Huberdeau's still with the team. And you got 10.5 tied up in a guy like Huberdeau when you need to put that money towards your young players. You know, all of a sudden that becomes a problem. And if Huberdeau can turn around and you know, he's playing pain-free and he's actually a step quicker and he's more productive, then, like I said, there's a chance you can trade him. But, you know, if he comes back and he's a step behind, it's just like, oh my God, like another 5 years of watching this. Like, we already have to watch Sharon Govich for another 4 years. Now you got to add Huberdeau on top of that. Like, oh my God.
Oh boy. Money well spent, Robert. Money well spent. Our listeners have spent their hard-earned time with us as well. Anything else we want to bring up on the podcast, Robert? Negative or positive around the Flames this season? If not, what's coming up from you on flamesnation.ca, and where can the folks find you at?
No, I think I would just end the episode by saying the future is very bright. And I have not been more optimistic about this team probably since 2014. Like it's been a long time since the Flames have had a direction, since they've had so many good young players in their organization. So, you know, we were talking about just some negatives there, but like there's a lot of positives in terms of the overall direction of the franchise. And like I said, we are out of like the super dark days. Like I think this season was the darkest it's going to get. There's lots to look forward to. There's lots of good young players coming up in the system, and you know, you got the new arena coming. Like you got Craig Conroy as your GM, and you can tell he knows what he's doing. He's setting the long-term direction of the team. Like, I'm really excited to see what Craig Conroy can build here. And you know, the drafting has been fantastic the last couple of years. Like, let's see that continue here with all these draft picks. You know, I still think they're probably at least 3 years away from getting back in playoff contention. But, you know, we're going to go through these 3 years. There's going to be some ups and downs, but there's going to be lots of young, exciting players to watch. The next core of this team is being built. You know, I'm pretty excited. I do think they're going in the direction where they will become a consistent playoff team for, you know, 6+ seasons. And I think we're going to see a lot of exciting hockey in the future. So, yeah, there's lots to be excited about and lots to be positive about for sure.
Yeah, I echo that as well, Robert. We are 2 weeks away from the release of this episode, 2 weeks away from the draft lottery balls falling and giving Craig Conroy another kick at the can with a high draft pick. This is the other draft pick, first rounder we have, wherever Vegas ends up being, and all those second rounders the Flames have to work with. So there's a lot to be excited about for the rest of this offseason coming up here with the draft being the focus now for Flame fans. Hopefully those lottery balls on May the 5th drop Flames way. We can add Gavin McKenna to that mix of all those players who want to take Huberdeau's money away from him. And the Flames can continue to build. There's a lot to like about the Flames. Yes, there was a lot of negatives, but there is a lot to like, and the future is bright for the Flames. He is Robert Munich at Ring of Fire CGY on social media. I'm Vintage Johnny 84, and of course the show is Red Mile Rundown wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate you for making us a part of your podcast rotation. Enjoy more of the Stanley Cup finals or playoff action. Well, not the finals yet, John. Enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll be with you next week as well on the show, where we'll talk a little bit more about the Flames and maybe a little look towards the draft, what the Flames should be doing in the draft coming up here in June. Lots to talk about still. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy your weeks ahead.